So this is now the Ecology Knowledge test. I think it's quite a straightforward kind of unit, right? But the problem with the ecology unit is there's lots and lots of words in it, right, that you must use, right? So it's kind of like a very wordy kind of unit. Okay, so some definitions, some words when we get into this. So in the environment is the conditions of surrounding an organism. Okay, that is your abiotic and your biotic factors, right? So that's looking at exactly where you kind of live, all the things that are around you, your environment, right? So what you sort of the area around your house is like. The habitat is the place where organisms live. Okay, so it could be a lake, it could be a pond, it could be a forest, it could be anything. Population, right? A population is the individuals of a species, okay, that are living in a habitat. Okay, so the population, so a habitat could be Preston, right? The population is all the individuals of a species living in Preston. The community, right? A community is then populations of different species. In the habitat. Okay, so if you think about Preston, your housing estate, or the whole of Preston, right? So population is the individuals of a species, that's all the humans living in the habitat. The community, it could kind of be all the dogs and the cats included in it. Right, competition, right, really what we've got to do is we've got to look for plants compete in a community for things like light, space, and animals compete in a community for things like food and mates. Interdependence. That is then when species depend on each other. It could be for things like food, or it could be for things like shelter, plants, it could be seed dispersal. Biodiversity is all the kinds of life in one area, right? So biodiversity, so it's all the different things. So you look at an area and it's got plants, it's got animals, it's got bacteria, and that's the biodiversity. And biotechnology is technology using living organisms. Okay, a good one is yeast, makes beer. Okay, so that's biotechnology. What are the three main types of animal adaptation? Right, so we've got structural, we've got physiological, and we've got behavioural. Right, so what I mean by those is structural could be where a body part or the colour changes. So body part, colour changes. So example, a polar bear is white. Physiological, right, is where the body part aids survival. For example, venom. right? So if you've got a snake that's got venom in it, right, that is physiological, and that then helps it live. And the last one then is behavioural, where their actions help survive. So for example, things like hibernation, migration. Okay, so hibernation is where your polar bear goes to sleep for 6 months, right? And migration is then when birds will travel from somewhere cold to somewhere warm, right? They'll travel around the world, right? Migrating to different places. Number 3, what is an extremophile? Right, it is a living organism that lives in extreme conditions. Okay. What is the name of the extremophile living in the following conditions? Right, I messed up here a bit. Look at that. I've actually told you the name of the extremophile, but what we can do is we can kind of do it backwards. So an extremophile that lives in high temperatures is a thermophile. Right? So thermo is obviously temperature, phile means it likes. A halophile, right? Now what I should have really done is I should have really put the conditions, right? But a halophile likes high salt. And an acidophile likes high acidic conditions. Okay, now they kind of work backwards and forwards either way. What are the names of the different stages in a food chain? We've got producer, right? So the producer is the thing that is making all the stuff in the first place, which is pretty much always a plant of some sort, because it's gaining the energy from the sun and it's starting the food chain. We've then got a primary consumer, right, which is the first thing that eats. So the grasshopper is eating the grass. The second one is the secondary consumer, and the third one is then the tertiary consumer. Right, now if you think about it, schools, primary school, secondary school, tertiary is college. And what this food chain here means, it means grass is eaten by a grasshopper, which is eaten by a mouse, which is eaten by an owl. Right. So what are the causes, effects and hindrances and solutions to global warming? Right. So obviously global warming is massive. It's affecting every single one of us. So the 3 causes are burning fossil fuels. Okay, it's quite small for me to write on this. Another cause is deforestation. Okay, and another cause is releasing trapped greenhouse gases. The effects, right? What effects are all these things happening to us, right? We're having climate change, okay, where temperatures are changing all over the world. We're getting increased drought. Don't think we're ever going to suffer from that in England, right? And we're going to have rising sea levels. Okay, that's global warming. It's then changing the climate. There are certain places that we're getting almost no rain year on, right? And then rising sea levels because the ice caps are then melting. Hindrances to us actually sorting out global warming is lack of awareness. Economic interests and expensive alternatives. Right, so that basically means that global warming's happening, right, but people are either unaware of it, Economic interest means they don't care because there's loads and loads of money that's involved, right? So what they're going to do, they're going to sort of decrease their billions of pounds in the bank, right, so that they can save global warming. And the alternatives to the products that you might have to reduce global warming tend to be more expensive, like electric cars. Solutions are more trees, because basically more trees help. Save energy, turn your lights off. More efficient energy sources. So use more wind, use more wave, use more tidal. Right. Question number 7, what is the greenhouse effect? Okay, now this is where my art comes in. So what I'm going to do is, there's Earth, right? Obviously Earth is a perfect circle like I've just drawn, right? Going all the way around the outside, I'll do it in blue, right, is a layer of the greenhouse gases, predominantly CO2 and methane. Oh, can't even do 4. Right, and then what happens is, over here, what you got is, you've got the big sun, right, that's obviously a sun, and the sun is then shining energy in. The energy goes through the greenhouse layer, which is the carbon dioxide and the methane. Then when it hits into Earth itself, what it does, it turns into heat, and what the heat does, the heat rises. Some of it goes out, but more of it then gets trapped in, because the carbon dioxide and the methane is acting like kind of like a blanket, right, and it's keeping that heat in. Now there's always been a certain blanket there, right, to keep the heat in, to keep Earth warmer, right, but the thicker the blanket is, the more heat that is then kept in. Right, and it's a bit like your greenhouse. Oh my god, I'm going to try and draw a greenhouse. Right, greenhouse. Let's do a cube house. Alright, so there's the cube house, there's your little door on the end. Right, what happens is, in this glass house here, sunlight goes in, and then it can't escape, which is why a greenhouse is always warmer. So, what is the greenhouse effect? It is the trapping of the sun's warmth in the atmosphere, okay, which obviously then leads on to extra things. What 3 factors affect the rate of decay, right? So this is then talking about when something dies, what factors affect how fast it actually breaks down. First one is temperature. The second one is the amount of water, and the third one is oxygen, right? And it's all to do with enzymes. Okay, so it's what conditions the enzyme will work in. If it's ridiculously cold, like in your freezer at minus 18 degrees C, things don't decay because it's too cold for the enzymes. If it's warmer, right, then what happens is the enzymes will work quicker. If it gets too hot, then the enzymes could decay or denature, and then they won't work at all. If there's no water, the enzymes won't work, and if there's no oxygen, right, for energy, the enzymes won't work. Right, the full balanced symbol equation for photosynthesis. We've got to do this one in green, haven't we? All right, so we're going to write it down, full symbol, so 6CO2 plus 6H2O, right, so the CO2 then comes in from the atmosphere, H2O comes in from the roots, do this bit in yellow, light from the sun, which is the energy source, and then what we then do is we make C6H12O6, which is glucose, plus 6O2, all right, so when it says balanced, balance means chucking a 6 there, a 6 there, and a 6 there. Right, the full balanced equation for aerobic respiration. Okay, so I'm going to do this one in purple. Right, this is really tricky, this one. It's almost as if I'm going to be writing this side over here. Plus C6H12O6, arrow 6CO2 plus 6H2O. Okay, that is then aerobic respiration. Full balanced again. The balanced bit is the 6, oops, no 6 there, 6 and 6, making the same amounts on both sides. Right, abiotic factors. An abiotic factor is a non-living factor affecting a community. Okay, now the biggest key to this is non-living, right? Now, there's quite a few that you can have, right? I'm going to write down 7, right? 7 main abiotic factors are light intensity. Okay, just use the right words. Don't write down the amount of light, write down light intensity. Temperature, moisture levels, right, which could, I suppose, be amount of water. Soil pH, that's obviously to do with plants. Wind intensity and direction. Carbon dioxide levels and O2 levels for aquatic. Right, so really this is very, very much kind of depending on plants. It's a lot more kind of directed at plants. 7 abiotic factors. Abiotic factor, right? So if abiotic is non-living, a biotic factor is a living factor affecting a community. Right, 4 main biotics, so biological ones, right, is your availability of food. Okay, if you've got no food, it's going to affect you. Another one is a new predator. Okay, right, so if you're living in Britain and all of a sudden tigers are introduced, right, then that's a pretty significant biotic factor that's introduced. A new pathogen. Okay, so you've got a new pathogen, so a living organism, a new disease could come into a certain area. It's like there's a disease called myxomatosis that went to rabbits and it killed something like 99% of rabbits. Right, and they actually put it out there in the population in Australia and they killed many, many millions of rabbits, but eventually they got immune to it. But that is a biotic factor affecting the community. And then last one is one species out competing another. Right, another favourite example ever, that is the red and the grey squirrel. Right, red squirrels, little and red and cute. Right, grey squirrels, bigger, stronger and more aggressive. So what they do is they compete each other because they're after the same foods. Right, 6 stages of eutrophication. Now this is a fantastic kind of question, right? That is a 6 marker. So 6 stages of eutrophication, right? So what you've got to do here is excess nutrients from fertilizers. Right, so what you've got to do is you've got to think, farmer, what he's doing is fertilizing his food, fertilizing his crops, fair enough, but what happens is a load of it dribbles down the field and then goes into the pond, the lake at the bottom of the field. Then what happens? It's fantastic, right? What happens is the aquatic plants flourish. Right, so all the plants that are in the ponds think this is fantastic, got all this fertilizer, all these nutrients, and what they do is they start to grow. Also, algae on the surface grow. Right, so that means all the plants at the bottom of the lake are growing, this is great, party time. Then also on the surface, algae, right, they think it's party time as well. Then what happens is you get an algae bloom and it blocks sunlight to the bottom. And so what happens is all of those aquatic plants before that were having a party, right, they now can't do anything, so O2 decreases. Okay, so the oxygen in the water decreases because these previously partying plants there then die because there's no sunlight getting down to it. So then what happens is decomposition increases, so things start to rot, right? And because the actual organisms that are doing the rotting are doing aerobic respiration, so all those kind of bacteria and things like that that are actually doing the rotting and breaking things down, they do aerobic respiration, which means the oxygen levels decrease even more. And then the final part of it, I'll do this in purple, is death of organisms. So your fish, right, that need oxygen. So your fish that are then living at the bottom, living in the water itself, because all the oxygen's then gone, right, then they then can't get oxygen, so what they die, and then eventually what happens is the whole pond or the whole lake dies. Right, so back to species. What are the three main factors that affect the distribution of a species? Right, number one is temperature. Okay, you don't find polar bears in the middle of Africa. Availability of water. Most animals are around water holes or in very, very close vicinity of water holes in places like Africa because of the temperature. Composition of atmospheric gases. Gases. Okay, question 15. What are the 4 ways humans use land and reduce habitats available for other organisms? So basically what that's saying is how are humans destroying the land or places that all other organisms live? So the way that we do that is we build more houses and we quarry for more things like bricks, or making the bricks themselves, the materials for it, your clay and your gravel. Second one is farming. Right, so what there used to be lots and lots of little fields, but now what they do is they cut down the hedgerows in between all the little fields and make massive fields, and then the hedgerow population's habitats are then gone. The rainforest, chop the rainforest down, and what it does, it reduces the habitats available for the animals that live in the rainforest. Dumping waste, right? So we chuck it in landfill, right? Or we do whatever else we're going to do with it, dumping waste. And we're also destroying peat bogs. Okay, and what we do with the peat bogs is we just make it into compost, or what we do is just burn it. So peat bogs is kind of, if you go walking in a certain place and it's like kind of really squishy and really wet, right? It's very, very kind of concentrated organic matter that hasn't rotted, right? And what we're doing is we're digging them up so that we can turn them into compost to go in our gardens, or we dry it out and we burn it. What is waste management? Right, waste management goes in the form of collection. So we get it, then we do is we transport it to wherever we wanted to put it, then we dispose of it, or at the same time we recycle. Okay, and that then leads to our waste. Right, so waste management's really got 3 points. It's got collect it, transport it, do whatever you want to do with it. Where do humans pollute, and what do we pollute with? Right, so where do humans pollute? Right, let's try and think of somewhere where humans don't pollute. Can't really think of anything. So where do they pollute? Water, air, and land. Okay, there's not many other choices really, are there? Okay, what do we pollute? We pollute water with sewage, fertilizers, toxic chemicals. Okay, there's probably lots of other things. What do we pollute the air with? Smoke, sulfur dioxide, acidic gases, CO2, particulates, land. What do we pollute that with? Landfill and toxic chemicals. Right, this is then going back to the question I just talked about before, right? So what is a peat bog, right? So what it is a dense wetland, right? So if you do stand on it, it's kind of a bit like standing on a wet sponge, right? And what it is partly decayed vegetation, right? So what it's doing is locking a lot of, lacking a lot of the conditions that are required for a full kind of decay, right? So there's very little oxygen that's actually in there. How do farmers increase the efficiency of food production, right? So what they do is they can reduce energy waste, they control the temperature, they have high protein diets for animals, and there's a fourth one in there I can chuck in as well, limit movement of the product. Right, so really what this question is saying is, how do farmers kind of make more money, right? So what they'll do is they'll reduce the amount of energy wastage. Okay, so however much energy they need to put into it, what they're going to do is they're going to try and reduce the amount of it. So greenhouses, right? So if you put plants in a greenhouse, you're reducing the energy waste because the greenhouse is then naturally warmer. They will control the temperature. Even if food is in a greenhouse, they will then put heaters on. If they've got cows, pigs, they will give them a high protein diet. So the high protein diet then builds muscle, which is then the food that we then want to eat. And they'll also, which is probably the best one of them, is limit the movement. So then they'll try and sell their products to closer markets. What is sustainable fishing? Right, it is controlling the breeding and catching of fish. Okay, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it, really? Right, sustainable